People have read it who have momentarily died then were revived. What were those fleeting moments like? Serious. Had a heart attack last year and my heart stopped 3 times in the air. Apparently, each time they shocked me back I woke up, how it felt, and told the staff a different knock knock joke each time. No lights or whatever, just felt like sleep. It was like turning off a TV. 1 second things were working and the next I am waking up surrounded by doctors and nurses with my feet in the air and a unit of blood being shot into me at high speed. How you're feeling? We lost you for a minute there. I was 15, had been through about 3-4 months of chemotherapy. I'd had a nosebleed on and off throughout the day and then after I went to bed it just kept on going. I couldn't sleep, just had to keep lying there, mopping my nose and sneezing out these rubbery little blood clots. At about 2 AM I started to feel sick so I reached for the container. I always had one by my bed because the meds I was on gave me really bad morning sickness, and threw up. It was a thick, dark red. After that I only remember what happened in short bursts. I think my mum had got up to go to the bathroom and I managed to hit the wall loud enough for her to hear. She came in and there was blood everywhere, coming out my nose and mouth, all over the bed and on the walls. Real horror show. Then I remember a paramedic being there, trying to help me out of the bed. I must have collapsed against the wall after that because next time I came round I was strapped to a stretcher and they were taking me downstairs. Then I was in the hospital, surrounded by about 6 doctors with these huge lights pointed right at me. It was to try and keep me warm because I'd lost so much blood. I could feel myself sweating but I was still cold. It was a weird feeling. One of the doctors cauterized my nose and I definitely felt that. It hurt like a mother even compared to my insides tearing themselves apart with sepsis and C. difficile. The doctor who did it was so nervous that he pushed the white hot material they use for cauterization right through my septum. I still have the hole today. The worst part of it all, looking back, is how peaceful it can seem. When I started vomiting blood, I went into shock. Hitting the wall to get my mum's attention was a subconscious thing. The rest of me just stopped caring. When the doctors were trying to save my life, I just wanted to black out again. I didn't want the lights to hurt my eyes and the doctors to hurt the rest of me anymore. The unconsciousness seemed easier, and that's how it felt when I was in the ICU for a few weeks after that. Doped up on Ket and slipping in and out of life. Being asleep was easy, being awake meant more pain and less dignity. So if you want to know what it's like to be that close to death, it's tempting. It's like wanting to hit the snooze button on your alarm at 7 AM. And maybe you do hit it once or twice but then you remember that you have work or school and that sleep can wait because you've still got crap to do. I got sepsis from tools used over at a dentist. I went to the dentist feeling fine. Happy that I finally got the work done that I needed. I went out shopping with my mom and had a lovely time. Around 7 PM I started feeling dizzy. I had just flown in from Japan, so I assumed it was jet lag and fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night with a 42 Celsius fever and I couldn't lift my head high enough to puke on the floor. So I puked all over myself, the bed and my lovely concerned dog. I tried to yell out to my mother but I didn't even have the strength to do that. Luckily, the sounds of me vomiting was enough to wake her up. I vomited so much I was vomiting the lining of my stomach as I had no more food left in me. My mother carried me to the car and drove me to the emergency room. Once arrived at the hospital I was put on the most uncomfortable bed ever and drifted off. I couldn't stay awake. That's when I saw nurses and doctors around me injecting me with things and shouting. I remember thinking that it must be serious if a doctor was shouting, as they usually don't show panic. I was lucid enough to laugh internally thinking wow, I must be really sick if I don't even freak out over all of these injections. And then it happened. I saw my mom crying and I thought holy crap, this must be for real. And as soon as I thought that, I fell asleep. I say asleep, but I died. For exactly 2 minutes. It really feels like falling asleep, but for me it was beyond peaceful. It felt like you didn't really have to worry about anything anymore and obviously in my case, I didn't feel sick anymore. As someone that was once suicidal, this was actually a horribly dangerous feeling as for the first time I got confirmation that dying wasn't all that scary. I woke up 7 days later in the hospital. It took me another 7 to start eating and they told me that I more than likely got sepsis from infected tools at the dentist. The scariest part was after that happened, I no longer feared dying, so I consciously try to pull myself out of a depression whenever I feel it coming. But for whoever is scared that their loved one felt pain in death, I can honestly say, it's a very peaceful feeling. Nobody knows if I was properly dead or just unconscious and not breathing with a very weak pulse. I was in a motorbike accident 2 months ago. I don't remember anything from 30 minutes before the accident and some time after. I woke up in a truck on the way to hospital. My friend said when he got to me after the accident I wasn't breathing and he couldn't feel my pulse. I was lying there completely still and cramped up and stiff, he said. He started CPR and after around 2 minutes I started breathing on my own, he said. For me it was just a blackout. No dreams, no visions, just nothing. I remember being very confused when I woke up, like why am I lying down on my back? Why is it so dark? Why does my body hurt all over? Apparently I asked over 10 times what happened. I was watching hockey in my room. The game was on the West Coast, so I was up late, having a couple beers. Everything was normal. The game ended at around 1 AM. And I fell asleep shortly after that. I awoke 30 minutes later with a dull pain in the funny bone area of my elbow. Thinking I had just slept on it, I started flailing it around trying to get some feeling back. The dull pain turned to numbness of the arm. So I stood up, silently panicking to myself, flailing my arm around. The pain got worse. As I walked into the hallway to grab some water, the pain abruptly shot up my arm into my heart. The pain I felt was absolutely indescribable, inhuman almost. My vision tunneled, and everything went numb. I could barely see. The ringing in my ears was loud, and sweat was pouring off me. I remember, in a daze, lightly striking the wall with my limp hands trying to regain some feeling. Then, I collapsed onto my living room floor. My mother heard the crash, came down and started absolutely freaking out. She called the ambulance, but decided to drag my dazed self to the car and rip to the emergency room. I remember fading in and out in the car, listening to the radio, feeling the cold air on my face from the open window. I'm pretty sure my mouth was hanging open, but it didn't matter. I was so at peace in the car. I had accepted that this was probably it. I remember mumbling to my mother how much I loved her and thanking her. Then I woke up in the hospital. I got stung by a freaking nest of wasps right next door to my home. They stung me all over my head, neck, behind my ears. 39 stings the doctor counted. It was insane. I ran away as fast as I could. The nest was on the door of a garage I had just come out of and bumped. I got home and was like, okay, I'm cool. Told my mom I got stung by some bees, but I thought I was okay. She didn't seem too worried. I decided to go take a shower. In the shower I began feeling dizzy and my back started hurting. I quickly turned the shower off and got my clothes on and began feeling dizzier and dizzier. Then when I came out of the bathroom my mom looked at me and had a look of horror. Told me to get in the car immediately. My face and head had swollen hugely. We lived just around the corner from the hospital, so she just drove me. Between my house and the hospital I started losing consciousness. Everything I saw had a yellowy tinge and I suddenly felt very heavy and tired. My breathing got very labored, but I sort of didn't care. I felt like I was slipping away into sleep. You know old TVs, when they were turned off the screen would be basically engulfed in black and the light shrank down into a pinpoint before disappearing? My vision slowly started feeling like it was doing that. I remember arriving at the hospital and they didn't even bother with registration. They threw my ass on a gurney and started pushing me back. As I was going back I remember closing my eyes and thinking I guess whatever happens. And then nothing. Just like going to sleep when you're super exhausted. I felt kind of peaceful and wasn't really thinking about anything much at all and the lights just went out. Some minutes later I opened my eyes and a very large man was staring at me, smiling and said, well, bad news. You're gonna feel completely fine within a couple of hours. You probably won't even get out of going to school tomorrow. He was right. 2 months ago I was OD'd on anesthesia in an oral surgeon's office. Coded in the ER and was dead for under a minute, but frick it counts. Between me going out and me waking up in the ICU there is nothing. No black void, lost loved ones, messages from the other side, nothing. Processing it since then, I don't know if the nothingness is comforting or terrifying. When I was 14 and at a party, I drank way too freaking much. Woke up on the bathroom floor vomiting my guts out, in and out of consciousness. I could faintly hear my brother in the background, calling for an ambulance. Woke up in a hospital bed where the doctor said I had been dead for 2 minutes, but they managed to revive me. My back was 0.56. In my experience, being dead was like being asleep. Absolutely no difference. No flashbacks. No afterlife that I could recall. It was exactly like sleeping. Very peaceful. I've died twice, medically speaking. The first time was due to a motorcycle accident. I passed out while cruising along at about 50 miles per hour. They still have no concrete idea why, and I was thrown into a light pole. I only have 2 clear memories of that event. The first is being upside down and wondering idly why the opposite road was passing by inverted. The second is hitting the pole and stopping. It hurt a lot. I cannot accurately describe how badly that hurt, but suffice it to say I'm a person with a high pain tolerance to begin with, and if I had been in my right state of mind I would have wept like a child. I just remember being on the pavement and things slowly going black and quiet, which honestly was a relief because it made the pain feel more distant instead of the crushing immediacy it had before. The only reason I didn't fall asleep was a bizarre moment where I heard someone yelling, "Ranger up you candy frick. Come on man. Get up. Get up. Get up," and then someone slapping my helmet, which was basically smushed really hard onto my head. The faceplate was bent up into my face and a good chunk was more or less shaved off. When I opened my eyes I saw my brother squatting on the pavement next to me too. This was odd because my brother has been dead from an OD for several years. I couldn't really gather the presence of mind to speak, so I just looked at him. The only other thing I remember is him glancing at his watch and saying something like "they'll be here soon" and then walking away. That and the ambulance ride to intensive care where I was pronounced dead and then opened my eyes a few minutes later and told them I wanted a Big Mac. Pretty serious WTF moment. I wish I could give more detail, but I honestly don't remember much of the incident and still have trouble with my memory as a result of the accident. Second incident I don't remember much of, but I was stabbed and nearly bled out. I honestly just felt really tired and wasn't connecting the dots that I was dying. Luckily a cop happened upon me after I collapsed on the side of the road and called emergency services, who then successfully revived me. I was apparently only gone for like 20-30 seconds with that one, so it doesn't stick in my memory like the first incident. That was back when I was hip deep in shady people who dealt drugs etc. So I more or less brought it on myself. Well, nothing official and I hope this is okay, mostly for the head trip it occasionally gives me. I almost drowned in a pool when I was 5. I remember looking up and seeing my mother dismissing the lifeguard because I was only playing and his legs starting to break through the water because he knew better, before blacking out. There was nothing between that moment and throwing up water after he pulled me out of the pool, though I can remember with absolute clarity how the water made everything shimmer as I was looking up. And sometimes I see that swimming shimmer as I'm walking around outside or if the light is really bright. And I can't help but wonder in those moments if my entire life, all my failures, successes, falling in love with a woman and having 2 children with her, the love of my life cheating on me, if everything for the last 30 years is just all inside my head during the last few moments before I die, still in that pool. I didn't die, but came extremely close. When I was having my baby, I had a full abruption, meaning the placenta completely disconnected from the uterus, which causes an enormous hemorrhage of blood everywhere. The little fetal monitoring alarm started going crazy and the nurse hit the emergency button on the wall. All of a sudden, a recorded message of code something or other started on the loudspeaker and I was surrounded by 20 or 30 doctors, nurses and anesthesiologists. They were all shouting out orders and stats and whatever the heck. Nobody would tell me what was going on though, other than I was going in for a C-section right the heck now. I started screaming just out of fear and adrenaline, and I remember my doctor grabbing both sides of my face and telling me, "You cannot scream. You have to stop right now or you are going to die. Do you understand?" So I was in the OR within a minute. But the strangest freaking moment of my life happened. Without wanting to, all my fear just disappeared in an instant and I had this amazing peace I have never felt before or since. I can't even describe how peaceful it was. I didn't see my life flash before me, but I did have a memory of a day about a year before where I was just playing in a field with my little boy. I hadn't thought about it before then, but now I kept seeing him, clear as day, laughing in the sun. It was the most vivid, intense memory I've ever had of anything. I was so at peace, and that memory made me the weird, peaceful kind of happy, like my work was done. I knew I was about to die and I was totally fine with it. It was a complete mind frick when I woke up and leaned at my baby and I lived. Still a mind frick, really. I feel like I always have that final destination effect, like something horrendous could happen anytime. About 5 years ago I had to get some pretty major surgery. I have had several over the years and this was going to be the last one. I always get nervous about having surgery, but this time I knew something was going to go wrong. It sounds silly, but I felt so strongly about it that I wrote a will and left it on my dresser just in case. Anyway, things go wrong during the surgery and I start to bleed out. Things went even further south and then my heart stopped beating. I found out later that I was dead for several minutes. Now I don't know if this was real or a hallucination or a mixture of the two. I woke up in what looked like space, but there wasn't any stars or light. I wasn't floating, so to speak. I was just there. I wasn't hot, cold, hungry, tired. Just a peaceful, neutral kind of thing. I knew there was light and love somewhere nearby, but I had no urge or need to go to it right away. I remember thinking over my life, but it wasn't like a montage. More like I was idly flipping through a book and snippets stood out here and there. I don't remember making a decision to stay or go back. I just woke up in the ICU 2 days later. Whatever it was, it changed my thoughts on a few things. I am still afraid to die, but I'm not worried about what happens after that. I didn't momentarily die, but I got to the closest stage possible to death and stayed there for a few days. But talking to people that have, we found we shared similar experiences. When I was 15, I ended up developing septic shock and multiple organ failure, both kidneys, liver damage, collapsed lung, morbidly low heart rate and blood pressure, very high fever 43 degrees Celsius, and being fully unable to move throughout the duration of my stay in hospital. Before I was rushed to hospital I had very vivid hallucinations. The one I remember most clearly happened about an hour before the ambulance first arrived. This whole fiasco occurred during the winter, so it got dark ridiculously early. I remember being asleep on my parents' bed facing the wall furthest from the door. It was around 6 PM and the lights were off, but for some reason the wall I was staring at was perfectly lit, enough to cast a shadow of anybody trying to enter the room. I saw the figure of man carrying a large bulky object standing at the doorway. He said in Arabic, "My family's Egyptian. I know your father and mother," and then proceeded to place the object on the bed and sit down. I remembered this so clearly I asked my mom who the person was that visited me earlier. Dying itself was strangely peaceful. I could hear my heart rate decreasing on the monitor and time seemed to slow. It felt like floating on a warm sea, slowly being dragged by the tide, while you feel your body unraveling and the warmth of the water diffusing into you. It was probably the most peaceful thing I've experienced. You have been visited by the Lord of the Good Boys. Comment who's a good boy to instantly become part of the Good Boy Squad. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.